for like nutrition and just health in general, there's a lot of science, and that science is continuously growing, but there's an art side to it as well, as far as like the psychology of change.
Mm-hmm.
And I know like with like people with Whoop scores, they'll see their stress scores and maybe not feel stressed, but seeing that score makes them more stressed.
Yep.
So
Yep.
maybe can you speak to, as we have more numbers available, if that can be a negative thing, or even just the psychology side of making nutritional changes or health changes?
Yeah, absolutely can be a negative because I mean that's where sleep tracking probably gets the most attention, because if someone struggles with sleep, they start tracking their sleep. They have an app or something telling them they suck at sleep. Then they get frustrated and more, stressed about it, and then they don't sleep.
Mm-hmm.
So like it all depends on like your personality and like how you're going to take those things. And like that's too forward is also working with a coach, because even something like HRV, heart rate variability, is like, so you can change it in the moment. You know, if you get an HRV reading that says like you are not, you have low readiness, you do breathing techniques and change that in the moment.
Well,
So like,
even to my time at Iowa, we did that every morning,
yeah,
the HRV or whatever, and it was almost one of those things where you would try to do everything and you would think that you would have a good score in the morning, and then you wouldn't, and then you would go to the facility thinking that the coaches saw that you didn't have a good score, and then what are they thinking about what I'm doing,
yeah,
or what, to
yeah,
recover, or how I handled my day yesterday, when
yeah,
actually I genuinely try to do my best, and
yeah.
now I make a mistake, and now are they gonna double up on it because of how I recovered, when really it's like, was that score actually depicting how I recovered the day before? And
Yeah,
those are
no,
some of the things that you guys are maybe referencing. That's maybe a specific example to how it affected me, but like, I know I
yeah,
wasn't the only one, so.
yeah, and that's where it gets into the crucial importance of never putting too much stock in one data point. You need
Mhm.
to look at trends, right? You need to look at things for a long time, for usually like months on end, to get a true sense for how someone responds to training, what their baseline actually is. Like that's another thing that Galpin talks about, is like some people's baseline HRV is completely different than another person's. So you really just cannot take things at face value day to day. You have to look at the trend, and not everyone just adapts at the same rates. Certain stressors might impact you different than others. So this gets in like stress resilience. So if somebody is not stress resilient, their HRV might be impacted by merely, to some people, minor things, whether that's studies, whether that's relationship stuff, whereas a stress resilient person may not be affected by that. You know what I mean? So like you just can't look at things in isolation and take one data point and make a decision off of that most times. Now, when it comes to the behavior side of things, this is where I can't get too mad at the Nebraska athletes back in the day, because like you just realize that there's so much that goes into um, what someone chooses to do, how they choose to behave. And unfortunately, nutrition is one of the hardest things, because number one, it has to do with so much has to do with your background, your upbringing, your beliefs about food, your preferences, because nutrition is so tied to, sounds weird, but pleasure, right? So like if you are someone who, like I'll never forget one of my first clients that I worked with as a personal trainer, he was Muslim. He wasn't from America. I don't remember what country he was from, but their cultural way of eating is very different than America. And, the way they approach food, the way they view food, the way it is a centerpiece of their family is completely different than us. So there are some things obviously that they would eat on a daily basis that, from a body composition, he was diabetic, he had multiple metabolic issues. But one of the things his wife loved to make for him was like this fried bread. That was a cultural thing. If here I am, I would like a 23-year-old kid. telling this guy to not eat that, that'd have been a recipe for disaster. So I'm thinking about so you focus on something else. What can you impact? Now, when it goes back to the Nebraska athletes, maybe they didn't understand the importance of nutrition. You don't know. Did they have a belief about a protein shake? Did they not believe it, that it would help them? Did they have a bad experience in the past? All these things factor into if someone will follow. And I'll never forget, so one of the teams I worked directly with was basketball, which is kind of funny, but at the time was pretty unique because it was kind of a joke, but at the same time, that's a really big win. So it was kind of fun to be a part of. Actually, one of the cooler moments of my time there was shaking Tom Osborne's hand after they beat Texas. At the time, Texas was number 2. And it was crazy, even for Nebraska ball. It was a great environment. But one of their star players, or their better players, after a lift, I mentioned something to him about, hey, make sure you grab a recovery shake on your way out. He looked straight at me and goes, "Man, I don't need that shit." And I was like, okay. So so many things factor into whether someone will do it. And if I could give any advice to any coach listening, any future coach, is just roll with the punches as much as possible. There's so much that is out of your control. And, on a team level, if you look macro, sure, there are things that you have to try to institute. Brandon, I'll never forget, one of the days I visited, when I was at Northwestern, I visited Iowa football. The pre-lift talk was Coach Doyle, talking about how you guys weren't eating enough calories or consuming enough calories because he didn't have to order as many protein shakes as he normally did. So that's a team cultural wide thing. On the individual basis, if someone has not been following the program set out for them, you have to drill down a little bit. It's not just because they're lazy or they're defiant. Most times, maybe they are, but you still have to figure out why,